Hey guys, Carlo Filippone here, your muscle chef, ready to talk to you about this guy, the chicken pound. What do we do with the chicken pound? We prepare grilled chicken in different flavors, 6 to be exact. If you're serious about bodybuilding and you meal prep, don't go anywhere else. This is the company for you.
RX Television on RXMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, better known as hashtag Ask Dave, brought to you by Species Nutrition, the Legion Sports Fest, Titan Medical, and the Chicken Pound. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. This is your 30-minute question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. All your questions on diet, training, supplementation, IFBB pros questions, whatever's on your mind, it is all on the table as we now bring in Dave Palumbo. Dave, now, last week, we had an exclusive sit-down interview with Steve Weinberger, the IFBB head judge. You asked him the whole gamut of questions about the 2019 Olympia. Well, you made the decision to disable the comment section, and obviously whenever we do that, it does bring about some controversy. Our viewers have questions. They want to know why we did that, and I wanted you to give the opportunity to address the audience as far as why we went about disabling the comments on that video.
Here's the problem. The problem is that unfortunately, most of the fans out there cannot critically ask questions in a very intelligent manner. They have to attack people. And you know what the truth is? I don't care if people attack me. You can go to the massage video. You want to attack me and tell me I look terrible. You can tell me I look like a zombie. You can say whatever you want about me. Nothing bothers me. But you know what? When I have a distinguished guest on the show, someone who took time out of their busy schedule, someone who didn't have to come on this show, Steve Weinberger, who's the head judge of the Olympia, I don't need any people attacking him personally. I don't need anyone saying anything nasty about him. It's just not necessary. If you have a problem with the judging decision, then take it up with the IFBB main office. You can send all your comments in there. You know, that interview was meant so that I could ask all the questions of everyone out there, what they were thinking, and I know I got pretty much everything in there, and Steve gave us his answer. If you don't like it, that's too bad. He's the head judge. That was what the thinking process was, at least from his perspective, as the head judge of why these guys and why these women placed the way they did. And I think it was very, once again, he didn't have to come on and justify anything. No judge ever does. But he did it because in our social media age, he knows that's the right thing to do, and it gives people an answer to all the questions that they had. And you really can't question anything anymore. You might not agree with the decision, but you really can't say, well, I can't figure out why they... Now you know. He told you why we put this guy here, why we put that guy there, why we put this woman here. And I thought it was a great interview. He did not say no to any of the questions I asked him. He didn't know any of the questions before I asked him. We didn't rehearse anything. I didn't send him the questions ahead of time. He said, Dave, I'll come on the show, no problem. And you know what? It was spontaneous, and I thought it went over very well. So I don't need anyone ruining future appearances by Steve because you're acting like a bunch of children on the comments, and you're making fun of people's personal life and stuff like that. I know, look, you guys do it to me all the time, but I don't care. It doesn't bother me. I don't give a shit. It doesn't affect my life. Other people, it bothers, and then they're going to say, well, I'm not going to go on this show if I'm going to be ridiculed in the comments afterwards. That's not how they want to be depicted. So that's why I did it. I don't do it for very many videos, but for when I have a distinguished guest on, if I had Arnold on, I would disable the comments too. I got news for you. I would. Because if I have something on my kids on there, I disable it too, because I don't need to hear any bullshit about them. You can say whatever you want about me, but leave my family out of it, and if I have special guests on, they deserve the same protection.
Let's get to the questions now. Generally, the first questions are from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. We did not get the email so far this week. Full disclosure, we're recording this on Tuesday. Generally, we record this on Wednesday. Dave has a lot going on tomorrow, so we wanted to record today. So Dave, for those unaware of the Dave Palumbo Experience app, if you want to give them a little primer.
The Dave Palumbo Experience app is an app that I've created about over, I think it's almost 2 years now. It's a place to go where I have all my articles, all my videos that I've ever done, all the information that you guys are seeking. It's like a library of Dave Palumbo stuff there. Plus, you have the ability, if you join the app for $29 a month, to ask an unlimited amount of questions of me. I answer them on there, but I answer them in an open forum so that everyone sees the questions and the answers, which is great because you learn from other people's questions. And then once a week, I do a Q&A video, just like this. It's like Ask Dave, except exclusive to the app members. No one else sees it unless you're an app member. We put workouts up every single week, so if you want to change up your workouts, we have an option to look at the workout of the week. And we're constantly increasing and making the app better because I want a place for people to go to learn. That's always what it's been about for me. And now with the new technology we have and with apps and online stuff, I think it's important that I create a library of what I'm doing because who knows, I could be gone tomorrow, and I want people to still have a place to go to understand and learn about bodybuilding and science and the diet and the supplements and the performance enhancing drugs and all that stuff. So that will always be there, and it's an ever growing, I guess you could say, accumulation of information so that you never really get bored because there's always new Q&As every single week.
Let's go to the questions of first, the question that we're going to be asking are from our Instagram. If you're not following us, official_RXMuscle. Let's go to Sarush_SRD. Good one here. What is the most recent piece of information you read that made you go, wow? Something you just read and maybe you didn't know or just caught you by surprise?
I'm trying to think. I was just reading an article that I can't remember what it was. It wasn't anything, a lot of times I read new research articles and I'm like, I kind of knew that. I'm glad they finally proved it type of thing. That's a lot of the times what happens. But, I wish I had this article in front of me now because I can't remember, but it was really interesting that, it's blowing my mind that I can't remember it right now, but, I read something recently. It was a new discovery they came up with, explaining and extrapolating on something that is very commonplace that I didn't really know. So I'm always learning. I just did a guru talk with Milos about carb loading, and Milos is very complimentary to me. I think we respect each other's intelligence, and even though, and I told this to Milos, even though I don't agree with everything you say and necessarily implement it in the athletes I work with, I like the idea of discussing the information and how carbing works and how insulin works and how the storage of glycogen works, because these are topics that will help solidify the concepts not only in the people who's watching mind, but in our own mind. So by us talking about it and discussing it, it makes us understand the concepts better. And I think that's really what I do on a regular basis does for me. So you think, I'm always giving you guys information. Well, by me teaching it and constantly talking about it, it re-solidifies it in my mind and gives me a better understanding of how to, deal with it, grasp it, and manipulate it in the people I work with as well. And I think that's something that, a lot of people take for granted. You could learn something, but the more you practice it over and over, that's why I answer the same questions a lot of times over and over and over again. But I know none of you guys ever say to me, oh, I've heard this already. You know why? Because every time you hear it, it re-solidifies it in your own brain and makes it more real and enables you to remember it better. And that's what it's about. You got to keep using everything. You got to use the tools you got. If you don't use them, you forget it and you lose that ability to use them. That's why people that are out of the industry, if I left the industry for 5 years and try to come back, I'd be playing catch up because you lose your edge. You know what I mean? That's why I'm petrified to step away for a second, to take a break, because I don't want to lose that edge. And I think it's important that I'm on the cutting edge of what's going on, because it's like the mechanic that doesn't go to school to find out the new computer systems, and then all these new cars come out and they can't fix them anymore. So it is what it is.
Let's go to Keith Gillespie Fitness. Dave, love the show. Do PCT protocols change much? Would an athlete on 12-week Winstrol Anavar only cycle use the same PCT protocol as someone using test trend equipoise?
Probably not. I use HCG and Clomid for the guys that are using testosterone and drugs that really heavily suppress the natural testosterone production in the body. Having said that, if you're using Winstrol and Anavar, while there is some suppression, maybe a little bit, not much, a lot of those guys, there's no reason to start injecting HCG and taking Clomid. A lot of times with those people, I'll put them on my Testalize product, and that's enough, really, to help re-optimize their hormone levels and turn everything back on, because you're not really super suppressing anything. When you talk about drugs that aromatize and convert to estrogen, the estrogen is what suppresses the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. If you're not having large amounts of estrogen being produced by a drug that's aromatizing, then you're really not going to get a lot of suppression. Now, the actual steroid itself can have some sort of a suppressive effect, and no one's really elucidated it in a very good way, and that's why it's hard to talk about it. We always say, does Anavar suppress your testosterone production? Well, kind of, yeah, but how? It doesn't do it through the estrogen route. Is it just that your body senses that there's testosterone, that there's some kind of hormone there, and it doesn't produce as much of your own? No one knows why it gets suppressed, but it doesn't seem to be as lasting. In other words, when you withdraw the drug, the Anavar, you withdraw the Winstrol, Primobolan, it seems like your body turns itself back on a lot more easily than, say, if you're on a drug that aromatizes heavily and severely shuts down your pituitary hypothalamus axis. And that's just the best I can do. So for people that are not on aromatizing drugs, I put them on Testalize. I put both people on Testalize, but I put them only on Testalize, and that seems to work. 3 pills twice a day. If people are experiencing any kind of gynecomastia, which they really don't do on Anavar and Winstrol because they don't aromatize, maybe I'll put them on a little Novadex, which kind of will block estrogen receptors, plus will help turn the hypothalamus and pituitary back on if there is any turnoff that occurred at all. But in my experience, while there is some suppression, it's very easy to turn the body back on these other drugs.
Good question here, and it's one that I know, Dave, you've talked about on past episodes about the, I quote, 90s bias. His question from AJ1095, we've seen guys like Ruli, Akeem, Juan, Kai lift heavy for reps, yet you still complain, and I'm going to say you, but then you / others who maybe share that opinion.
Yeah.
You still complain about guys not training hard enough compared to the guys in the 90s, even though there were guys like Paul Dillette who didn't train hard at all. Is it true in general that guys train less hard, or are you just more biased towards your era?
No, I think the difference is that in the 90s, there was like Vince Taylor and Paul Dillette trained light, and that was it. Everyone else trained heavy. Nowadays, it's like no one trains heavy except like guys like Juan and Akeem. And there's more out there, obviously. In other words, it seems like there's a minority of people that are still championing that heavy training, heavy duty type training, whereas more people are going with machines and are just not really pushing it to the max in the gym the way they did in the 90s. Look, in the 90s, everyone was chasing Dorian, and Dorian trained balls to the walls. And after Dorian came Ronnie, and Ronnie trained balls to the walls. So training through the 90s was the most important thing you could possibly do, even into the early 2000s. And everyone was always trying to figure out how to get stronger, how to intensify the training effect. And they were reading. They wanted to know what Dorian thought. They wanted to know what Mensah thought when he was around. They wanted to know what Ronnie was doing. And, Ronnie was so insane because Ronnie was doing high reps and he was doing heavyweight and he was training 2 body parts a day. He was doing everything that you theoretically shouldn't have been able to do if you were lifting heavy, but yet he was able to do both. Whereas Dorian's like, look, you don't need to be in the gym for 2.5 hours. You don't need to overtrain your body part. You don't only need to train 3 or 4 days a week, but you need to train heavy and high intensity. And so that's how guys were training, and they were modifying it. No one, I don't think there were very few people training with 1 or 2 sets, But what I was doing is I was personally reducing my sets down to 2 sets per exercise. Okay, so if I was, after I did my first warm-up, my first bench pressing, session, whether it be flat bench or incline bench, maybe I did 4 sets because I had to warm up, do a working or two working sets. When I would go to all the other exercises, I was doing 1 or 2 sets per exercise. I was warmed up. I was going heavy weights, and that's it, and doing that set. And I was out of the gym with 8 sets maybe done, whereas most guys were doing 16, 25 sets, And so I reduced the load I was doing, but I kept the weight heavy. So I was still lifting just as heavy, just with less volume. And I found that it worked better for me because I was recovering better. And I think that more people will find that if you do less volume, you'll be able to lift heavier weights. And you'll be able to put more intensity into those heavy weight sets because you're not worried about doing 15 more sets. You're like, all right, this is all I got to do. I got to do these 6 sets. How hard is that? I could put 100% intensity into 6 sets. Can't do it for 25 sets. No way. No one's putting 100% intensity into 25 sets. I'm sorry. That's just not the way it's going to happen. So I found that my body overtrained quickly. So if I did less sets, even though and in heavier weights, I was able to get the maximum benefit out of it without the negative aspect of it, which was making my body too catabolic.
It was actually cool. Before we go to the next question, Dave, you sent me this video. There's a YouTube channel. I'll give him a shout out. We actually got to hang out with him this past Olympia. Makaveli Motivation.
Yeah.
He does all these motivational workout videos. One of the ones that he did last week, he took your answer that you gave regarding hardcore training.
Yeah.
Where you're basically saying that, are you willing to put it on the line?
Yeah.
That if you want to achieve that whole thing. And he laid that under, this whole training montage. Really cool. I know you sent it.
He did a great. He does a great job. That guy. He's a really talented video editor. I know. I just saw him out at when I was.
We saw him at the Arnold Classic. Yeah, that's where you met him.
Well, no, we were doing the just recently when Aaron and I were doing the prediction videos for the Olympia. He was over at Redcon. Aaron had hired him to do some stuff over there. So. He's doing good stuff. He went from an obscurity into now people really respect his work because his videos are enjoyable to watch, and that's the key. A lot of these videos, we give a lot of information, but sometimes you want to just relax and kind of enjoy and get motivated before you go to the gym, and his stuff is great for that.
Let's go to Diogo Lopez. What was your biggest mistake during peak week, and what were some of the biggest mistakes you see in some of your clients or other bodybuilders make during peak week?
Yeah. Early in my career, I did too many diuretics, I think. I used to do the old aldactone for 3 days and diazide for 2 days, and it was just too much. It wiped me out. I always looked great 3 days out, and then I got too flat. This was in the 90s. So once I stopped doing the aldactone, that really fixed the problem for me. That was probably a main problem. I usually carved up enough. I don't think that I ever came in too flat. I've over-dieted for shows. 96 USA, I definitely over-dieted for. I probably was 10 pounds lighter than I should have been. And I came back at the 96 Nationals 10 pounds heavier. So I know I over-dieted for that show. So, a lot of times what happens is you think you got to keep pushing harder and harder and harder, and you got to get leaner and leaner and leaner. And eventually what happens is you start losing muscle, or you overdo it. And so that's why it's a good idea to have a coach. A coach is a guy who's going to look at you and say, hey, too much. Or, hey, you better get your ass in gear because you're not doing enough and you're not going to make it. And that's why I like having a coach or a second set of eyes on you. I always had a couple of friends helping me, but, after a while, sometimes you're not at the gym all the time. And early in my career, I had guys watching me. And then when I had a little era I went through where I was kind of watching myself, I might not have been hard enough on myself or known when to pull the trigger. And then later in the end part of my career, I kind of had it down pat. I knew exactly what to do with my physique, and I knew how it worked, and I just repeated the same formula over and over again. But, look, we all make mistakes, myself included. I don't think I've ever was at a show that I was out of shape at, but there were shows that I was better than others, and that's the best way I can put it.
Let's go. So this is a question that we have gotten on a recurring basis, but again, with a new audience, good to know, good information to know. What are the key things for, first of all, it's from fame_athletic. What are the key things to check for when doing blood work? I followed your advice off being entirely at the end of a cycle, and now I want to do my blood work before I get on my next cycle. So I guess for the markers, they should look for.
I give out the free list of blood work if you guys email me at huge285@aol.com. Now I'm going to get 6,000 emails, but it's okay. I give out the list of blood work free that I recommend. Maybe we could put it in the comments, Sid, below. For this video, so people could just go check and I don't have to get 6,000 emails. But there's a list of different markers that you should get tested, and I pretty much have put them together that I think are the most valuable. There's more that you can get done, and that might be even extra valuable, but these seem to be the main ones. And when I get people to get this blood work, I can look at this blood work and I know if there's a problem, if people have a problem, whether they have a liver problem or kidney problems or blood disorder issues or hormone imbalances. Using this and blood sugar control. Those are all the different areas you want to look at. Blood sugar control, okay, kidney function, liver function, cholesterol too, and your blood work, obviously your white blood cells, red blood cells, hemoglobin, hematocrit, to see how that's all going. Your hormone panels, testosterone, estrogen, DHT, cortisol. You want to look at your electrolytes, sodium, potassium, those kind of things. And, most of the time, most people's blood work is pretty good. Very rarely did I get blood work where everything's all completely out of whack. A lot of times people have highs and lows, but they're like a tenth of a point high or a tenth of a point low. Those are insignificant. So sometimes people show me blood work, they're in a freaking panic because they have like 25 things that are out of range, and meanwhile, most of them are just slightly out of range. To me, kidney function, creatinine is a big one for bodybuilders because a lot of us, put a big strain on the kidneys via high blood pressure, via all the protein we eat, So I like to look at that. That's an important one that I take very seriously when that's high, and we always try to get that back to normal before we get them people back on a cycle. Blood sugar control is something that's become very, important to me recently because I realize that long term it could be very damaging. So we want to make sure your fasting blood sugars are good, your hemoglobin A1Cs, which is your 3-month average of blood sugars. They take that test. We want to check that out. Of course, hormone panels are really important. We want to see what your testosterone is. We want to see what your estrogen is. It too high? Is it too low? We want to see what DHT levels are. Too high, too low? Do we want to see if you have high prolactin issues? Once we can tell all this, if everything's looking good, then I can go ahead and we can, start implementing the next stages of your programs. If things are out of whack, we can fix them. Blood work is tremendous. It gives you a really good idea of what's going on a chemistry level inside the body. That doesn't mean that it tells you the whole story. It gives you a snapshot on that day, what's going on in your body. And, a lot of times I diagnose thyroid problems with that. The good thing about the blood work that I recommend is that it's very complete. I notice a lot of doctors when they order a thyroid test, they order TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. Well, that's great that we know if the pituitary gland is producing too much or too little, but it doesn't tell us anything about active thyroid hormone in the body, T3. A lot of times I see people order TSH and T4. They don't order T3. That's great. We know what TSH is, we know what T4 is, but T4 is inactive thyroid. We don't know what T3 is, So I don't know, I've seen guys and girls who have thyroid problems get sent to the endocrinologist. The endocrinologist orders test and doesn't order T3. How could you be an endocrinologist and not look at what active T3 is? That's the most important value. Now, granted, if your TSH is high, your T3 is probably low, but sometimes it's not. So you got to run all these things. So like I said, if you take a look at this list of blood work that I give you and you give it to your doctor and he's cool and he runs it all, you'll have a very comprehensive panel of what you need to check for before going to the next stages of whatever you're doing.
A couple of this or that questions. First one from Konstantin Malamov. Explosive training or time under tension for muscle gain?
I think that people always ask me about different training methods, and I always say yes. They're like, what do you mean yes? I'm like, they're all good. All training techniques are good. To me, high intensity training, heavy weights, high intensity, full range of motion is the best type of training. But having said that, throwing in a couple days of some supersetting or some drop sets or forced reps, even some higher repetition days, where you're doing slightly lighter weights to give your body a break every once in a while is good to incorporate. But to actually build solid, dense muscle, you got to lift heavy weights, okay? Very few people are genetically gifted enough to lift moderate weights, and put the muscle gains that we're looking for as bodybuilders on their bodies. There are people out there that do it. It happened to Dillette, it happened to Vince Tell, but they're far and few between. Most people, if you talk to guys like Dorian, Ronnie, how'd you put all that muscle on? Heavy ass weights, that's the answer, okay? You got to lift heavy weights and you got to use full range of motion. Because if you don't use full range of motion, you're not going to develop the muscle fully. So just because you got heavy weight on the bar, if you're leg pressing, 6 inches, you're not doing anything. So full range of motion, control that negative, push heavy weights. It's a simple formula. Go home, rest, eat, and recover, and do it again the next day. It's really a boring, repetitious type of sport. But for the people who are, conscientious enough and persistent enough to do it day in and day out and get into that routine and not be, bored by the routine, but inspired by the routine because they know that it's going to lead to good muscle gains, those are the people that are going to get the best results.
Let's go to Hassan K998. Is there a point to do a heavy off-season bulk, or is a caloric surplus better?
Heavy caloric bulk versus calorie surplus. I'm not really sure the difference of that. Sounds like they're both, involve more food. You need more food to build more muscle. I mean, that's the bottom line. How much more? Very individualistic. That's why, once again, having a coach in the off season who's going to customize that for you is of a benefit. I usually give people a baseline amount of food based on their weight, and I see how their body responds. If they don't gain weight, I increase the food. If they gain too much weight and they look sloppy and fat, I cut the food back. It's very simple. It's trial and error. And once again, a lot of times I go through the off season with my clients and I just say, great job this week. I'll talk to you next week, or I'll talk to you on Friday in 5 days, because I don't have to change anything because they're gaining weight. If they're gaining and their body is doing what it's supposed to, I stay out of the way. Because if you start meddling too much and fiddling with the different variables when you don't need to, you screw things up. Let the body do what it wants to do. If it's growing, if it's not growing, it's losing weight, and you're trying to gain weight, then I got to change something, right? So that's how I do it.
Kyle Marinucci, I know you don't like to use lasix as diuretic, but is it a loop diuretic? But it is a loop diuretic. So how close to the show would you use it, and and to what quantity?
I use all diuretics the day before. I don't ever need it. I never start it 2 days out unless a person has to make weight or something like that. That's a different story. A loop diuretic, if you're only using a little bit of it, it's probably not going to be a bad thing to do, because you're not going to really deplete very much potassium if you're using a small amount of like a lasix or something like that. 20 milligrams of lasix twice or 3 times during the day on a Friday before a Saturday show probably won't cause any cramping or any issues at all. Usually in dosages that small, any depletion or any kind of cramping would be due to sodium, probably not potassium, even though you lose both. So, once again, I never really started diuretic before a day before. Once in a while, I have clients who can't get Diazide, which is what I like to use, and they'll use a loop diuretic like Bumax or Furosemide, which is I can't remember the name of it, but or Lasix, and in which case I just give them small amounts of it. The difference between Diazide and like a loop diuretic like Lasix is Lasix works very quickly, but then it stops working. So you can give it in small amounts throughout the day, and then you know that it's not going to continue going. Whereas Diazide, I kind of do 2 dosages during the day on a Friday before a Saturday show, and I let it do its thing because it can keep working for 12 hours, So if I do a morning dose or maybe a noon dose or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then I'll do a dose 9 o'clock, almost around bedtime, I know that thing's going to work all through the night, and they're going to be peeing all night. If I give a 20 milligram Lasix at 7 o'clock at night, probably before they go to bed, it's not even working anymore. So they might have to get up in the middle of the night and do another one if necessary. The good thing about the loop diuretics is that they get rid of fluid very quickly, though, so you can kind of see what happened. Oh, I gave it to you, 2 hours, 3 hours passed. All right, well, you look better, but you need more. Let's give you more. Diazide, you never give more yet, because you got to let the thing work for a little. It'll work for 8 hours strong. And once again, so I think that Diazide is more predictable. It's potassium sparing, so it's safer. But if you get caught in a jam, you got to use a loop diuretic. Just use little small amounts of it. I think that's the way to go.
Jason Cook, Dave, I have severe sciatic nerve pain down my leg, into my foot following back surgery. I'm prescribed gabapentin. Will that medication affect training response?
It kind of dulls the nerve pain response, that you're getting, the hypersensitivity. Will it affect muscle gains? I don't know. I mean, it really shouldn't theoretically. I don't know. Everyone has different side effects on the drug. Look, if it's making you pain-free and enable you to train, then I have to imagine that it's probably providing more benefits than negatives. Now, if you're getting negative side effects from the drug itself, where you just feel terrible all the time, then that's a different story. But I don't think the drug itself inherently will inhibit muscle or anything, if that's what you're asking.
We asked a question about biggest peak week mistakes. Someone wants to know biggest mistakes clients make during their check-ins.
During their weigh-ins?
Yeah.
I don't know, not filling out the application form right? I don't know. I don't know. What mistakes do you do during check-ins? I mean, I don't know what they're asking.
I guess I'll step out and I guess a question about making weight. Is that a possibility?
I mean, I guess people do extreme things, and then what happens is they can't recover from it. That's usually the dumbest thing, Or what? They're so worried about making weight that they actually wind up weighing in 10 pounds lighter than the weight class limit, and that's too much. the trick is when you're going to make weight, you want to make weight, but you don't need to make weight by 10 pounds. You know what I mean? You can make weight by 1 pound. So the less you have to do, the better, especially if the weigh-in is 2 days before and you're, let's say your weigh-in is on Thursday and you're competing on Saturday. You don't want to be depleting yourself down to 0 on Thursday, because now it's going to have a tough time filling up the rest, those 2 days leading up to the show. So just do enough to make weight and then let the rest take place. Now, if you're making weight the morning of the show, that's a different story, So once again, the strategy changes according to when the weigh-in is in relation to when you get on stage.
Steve Fletch, how would you transition from men's physique into the open class? Is it really just as simple as eating more constantly? I'll throw in another one, Dave, because I remember when you interviewed Brandon Hendrickson after he won the Olympia last year, you talked about the fact that he has legs, that he could possibly be a fit. So what would you advise somebody looking to go physique to open?
It depends. Some of these physique guys like Brandon and Andre, they have legs actually, so if they ever wanted to move up, it's just a matter of putting a little bit more size on. So some of these guys can go right into classic physique and compete now. But I think a lot of those guys don't really train their legs too hard, only because I think they feel it thickens their waist, and the smaller they can keep their waist for men's physique, the better. For most of these guys, it's just a matter of starting to train your legs a little harder. You know what I mean? Build some mass on your legs and balance that upper body, because I think a lot of those men's physique guys are upper body heavy, meaning that their upper body is way ahead of their legs. So, if they're young, the legs will respond and they'll come up. If not, if they're a little older, it might be a tougher transition. But once again, you got to try. Logan Franklin did a great job switching over. He goes back and forth. He's got legs, he's got everything. Great classic physique.
So I guess this must have been a coordinated attempt, because we have, to my count, about 12 questions regarding Species Gym. Now, Dave, Species Gym. They're located in Katy, Texas.
Yeah.
If you're not following them, it's at Species_Gym. They keep asking all these questions about whether you're going to interview the owners of Species Gym.
Right.
What do you think of Species Gym? So why don't you tell the audience what you think about Species Gym and whether we're going to get the owners on for an interview?
Well, first of all, the owners are Kyle Watson and Lily. And Lily is one of my clients. Kyle was too. And they're both friends of mine. They carry, obviously, Species Nutrition. They're very big supporters. Kyle wanted to open his own gym. He said, hey, I'd like to call it Species Gym. I said, hey, you're a friend of mine. Let's do it. It's branding for both of us. I said, I have no problem with it. You're a good representative. I know you're really passionate about the gym business and you really love training, and you're going to put a great equipment in there. And he's already moved the gym actually once and into, I think maybe twice, into bigger locations. They opened their second gym now. Super proud of what they accomplished. Kyle really was, he wanted to compete. And I said, look, you should just focus on your business. You're so good at it. And he's been really focusing on the gym. The gym's been doing amazing. And, I can't be happier with what they're doing and how they're representing the brand over there. So, they carry the products. People can go in there and buy the products right in the gym. They have clothing there. They probably have more clothing than I do, because I allow them to make up some of their own clothing there as well. So, if you're in that area, in the Texas area, and you want to stop in, you contact Kyle on Instagram or Lily on Facebook, and you tell them, look, I'm in the area. Dave Palumbo sent me. I guarantee they'll probably give you a workout or hook you up over there. It's a terrific training environment over there. And I know, what's his name, was training there now, Rashid Oldraker. Rashid is training there with Kyle during the day, and hopefully we're trying to get him to make a comeback to the pro stage. He had a couple injuries. Candace Lewis was training there. I think she still trains there. So it's a great environment. If you're in that area, you're lucky, because Kyle puts everything into that gym. It's probably overdone. I have never been there in person, to be honest with you. I've only seen the videos and all the pictures. One of these days, we're going to go down there and hopefully do a training seminar. I've been promising Kyle, but I keep having babies. I got to stop having babies, and then I can come down there with Chris Aceto and do a little training seminar. Maybe bring Milos down there. That's the goal. And Kyle's got a great story. And one of these days, I told him maybe call into the radio show this week, and we'll broadcast. From there, you can tell us his story and go over the fact that he's got the new gym. where it is, and if people want to check it out, they can go check it out. But there's a website for it too, and there's an Instagram. If you go to the Instagram Species Gym, you can see all the highlights of what's going on and get all the latest updates.
We have a lot more questions, but I know we're really pressed for time. Somebody actually asked about the show SportsFlex and whether we would bring that back. That was from 3-4 years ago. We did 2 episodes. One of the episodes had Ronnie Coleman and Jason Polson. We thought it would fly, but you know what? Apparently, bodybuilding fans only come to RX Muscle to hear about bodybuilding.
Sid, I have interviewed like big stars in other sports. Herschel Walker, Jason Statham.
Yeah.
And you know what? They get hits, but they don't even get...
No.
They don't get close to the hits the bodybuilding interviews. No one cares about the other stars. It's funny. Bodybuilders are so specific to bodybuilding. They can care less if I had, Bruce Willis on the TV show or, Matt Damon. They would be like, who cares? Can you get me Ronnie Coleman? That's just the way our industry is. So, while I have the opportunity to do, interviews with stars, it seems like they want the bodybuilding stars.
It's incredible because when we do go to these big shows, we meet people from all over the world. We meet people from England, from Canada, as an example.
Yeah.
And me as a soccer fan, a hockey fan, I'll just casually as an icebreaker ask them, like, well, who's your favorite Premier League team or who's your favorite hockey team? Nothing. No response. Like, oh, well, actually, then they'll tell me something to the effect that, their ESPN is RX Muscle. They come here. Or,
they watch our channel. They don't even watch TV.
Right. They check the other, bodybuilding media sites because that's their interest. That's just what they're into.
The only person who could answer that question for you would be Dexter Jackson. I know Dexter and Troy Alves. They watch a lot of sports. They'll...
So this last question, Dave, I'm actually not going to ask it here. You're going to make a separate video. It is about being in a serious relationship while competing as a bodybuilder. Is it a good idea?
No.
I mean, you all need to just there's your answer. So
no, you know what? I'll answer real quick because it is a vibe. Look, when I was competing, being in a relationship is really good. I'll tell you why, because it's a very stable environment. The last thing you want to be doing is going out partying and stuff like that and having to look for girls or girls looking for guys. Being in a relationship with someone who understands what you're doing, who maybe competes themselves, who can, support you is really important. And it creates a strong base of operation, and it takes away any distractions from the outside. When I was in my 10 years of really focusing on bodybuilding 100%, I didn't do anything. I didn't go out. I didn't go to clubs. I didn't have a drink of alcohol. I just did bodybuilding. And my idea of an exciting night out would be go to a restaurant and to a movie. So, and that works. The problem is that, what happens is you pigeonhole yourself into a comfortable relationship sometimes that it's not necessarily a relationship based on, the true ideals of maybe the other, of a person you're looking for. It just happens to function well. And once again, we attract who we are at the moment. And I think we are always changing. I know when I left bodybuilding and stopped competing, I was a different person. I recreated myself. So I then re-attracted something that I was now that I wasn't then. So the relationships I had earlier in my career functioned well during that time period. But when I changed who I was and where I wanted to go, the relationship ended because it wasn't functional anymore. And so you guys may see that. A lot of times people get divorced when they look at Dorian. Dorian had a great relationship with his wife. He had 2 kids, and then he retired, and all of a sudden he was divorced. So you change, and when you change, if the other person isn't changing too, it doesn't become compatible. So I think relationships are important for stability, and I think relationships are important for creating a stable environment at home. But they should be based on love, obviously, not just convenience. And, some people are slow learners. Look, Andy Hammond's been with his wife since they were, teenagers. And they're still together through his whole bodybuilding career, through everything he's gone through. So they had a great relationship and they were able to function. Not everyone can do that. And so there's no right or wrong. Just do what feels right. That's the best advice I can give you.
I think I was just going to ask you to make a separate video on that topic, but you made it into this video. That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave, again, brought to you by Species Nutrition, the Legion Sports Festival, Titan Medical, and the Chicken Pound. For Tyler Shore and Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.